Hello, U.S. history students! Mrs. Olson here with a video lesson titled Life on the Homefront. We are going to be learning about what life was like in the United States during World War II when soldiers were fighting in Europe and the Pacific. Your learning target reads that you will be able to understand how World War II placed tremendous demands on Americans at home and led to new challenges for all Americans. Now's a good time to start taking notes if you haven't done so already. There are going to be two main categories that we will be discussing. One is industry and workers. So we'll be talking about what America was manufacturing for the war and who was working in those factories. The second category, which you'll see that it's actually a thread throughout, is going to be wartime racism. Our first topic under industry and workers begins with American women working in the factories. Have you ever heard of Rosie the Riveter? Or maybe you have seen her in a picture. Rosie the Riveter was the name given to women workers of World War II. With many men fighting overseas, women stepped in to fulfill those roles. Those tanks and planes weren't going to build themselves. Before this time, it was expected that once a woman was married, she would stay at home to be a housewife. She would take care of the home and the children. Now, because Rosie was so successful in fulfilling these jobs in manufacturing, it changed the way that Americans previously thought about women in the workforce and women holding jobs. So this is Rosie the Riveter. This is another Rosie the Riveter. In fact, this image of Rosie, this artistic rendition, was the first one created by Norman Rockwell. So she was around and she still is around, but this image is the one that kind of replaced the original image. This is the one that you often see now. In fact, memes and other forms of art mimic this version of Rosie. So once again, it's a nickname given to the women workers of World War II. On these next two slides, I believe, I want to share with you photographs of actual Rosies in the factory. And Rosie the Riveter is kind of a catchy name. The R in Rosie, the R in Riveter. When you put two pieces of metal together, like the outside of a plane or a tank, what holds it together is a rivet. And so a riveting gun pushes the rivet through the two pieces of metal to hold it together. Okay. Our second topic under industry and workers is the topic of African Americans. They were not hired by a lot of the factories. In fact, it wasn't until FDR issued an executive order that said when it came to defense, building things for the war effort, there could be no discrimination. The country was fighting a war and needed those planes, tanks, ships, and guns. The effect of the hiring of Black Americans in wartime industry disrupted old patterns of social and economic segregation. So it helped to move the needle a little bit in the fight for equality. In no way, shape, or form was it equal, but it did help to make it a little bit more equal. And to give you a statistic, there were 2 million Black Americans who worked in the factories during World War II because of this executive order. So here are some actual photographs of African American workers in the 1940s. The caption here reads, 6 African American men attaching skins to the fins of medium bombers in a large Eastern aircraft plant, May of 1942. So the United States is well into the war effort for World War II. A few more photos. And our third topic under industry and workers deals with the Bracero program. It was the name for the government call for Mexican workers to the United States during World War II. Again, with many men fighting overseas, it left vacancies in the agricultural workforce. So the United States government called upon Mexican workers to work the farms and the orchards. They also helped to build roads. Over 200,000 Mexican workers came to the U.S. under the Bracero program. The Mexicans were not treated well. I'm going to show you some photographs here in a second of them not being treated well. First, I wanted to show you this newspaper clipping from Northwest Farm News, and you can see that the title reads, Mexican Workers Wanted in October. That's apple picking time. Farmers and orchardists in Washington state, that's our state, everybody, have placed orders for the approximately 6,000 imported Mexican workers for the month of October, and that is dated 1943. Okay, a few more pictures, real photographs of the braceros working in the United States because the U.S. government called upon them. When they actually entered into the United States, they had to be processed, and so that's what this long line is for. Now, like I said before, the Mexicans were not treated well. When they came to the United States, they had to do a few different things with inspection, but one of those was to be sprayed with DDT. Now, DDT is an insecticide which was banned in the 1970s. You can see here, let's see, where is it? Much in the same manner in feeling used in handling livestock. They were treated like animals, and they're not getting sprayed with DDT for any kind of good reason except for racism and prejudice. In this sign, it shows that, in this sign you can see that it says no dogs, no Negroes, so that was a name for Black Americans, and no Mexicans. It was a sign posted on a restaurant in Texas where discriminatory practices were upheld. Okay, we are going to move on. I want you to take a look at the map on this slide that shows where the Sun Belt is located. During wartime, many Americans moved to the southern part of the United States where there were many manufacturing jobs. Because so many people moved, cities grew up. The Sun Belt became urbanized. So urbanization means the growth of the cities. Okay, so Americans moved to the Sun Belt for wartime jobs, specifically 15,000 in Southern California and the Deep South. And I want you to know that the federal government spent a lot of money, $1.2 billion. So $1.2 billion in the 1940s, not in the time period that we live in. $1.2 billion to build housing, schools, and also community centers. We're going to move major categories, although, like I said before, you can see this thread of wartime racism throughout all of the previous slides. Starting in the 1930s, many African Americans left the South in search of better opportunities. This period is called the Great Migration and actually lasted for about 40 years into the 70s. So while we just talked about many people moving into the Sun Belt during the war years, know that many Black Americans were moving north. They began to move into white neighborhoods, so-called white neighborhoods, and white jobs. Even though things were supposed to be better in the North, it was only better up until a point. This is a photograph of an actual sign that was posted in a neighborhood, and you can see it says, "We want white tenants in our white community." There were so-called white neighborhoods that did not want Black families living next to them because of racism and prejudice. So what happened in Detroit were race riots, and these photographs are a few that come from the city of Detroit. Okay, we're going to go to yet another part of the United States, out to California, specifically Los Angeles, where the Zoot Suit riots occurred. Now let me show you a picture of a zoot suit. Hold on, there we go. So that is a zoot suit in a few different forms. You can see that the three-piece suit itself has a lot of material, okay? The zoot suit and the people who were wearing them angered many Americans because cloth was being rationed for wartime use. The zoot suit was popular with Mexican American teenagers. There we go. The zoot suit angered many Americans because cloth was being rationed for wartime use. You want to think about parachutes, tents, uniforms, and such. People thought that wearing the zoot suit was unpatriotic. And so what happened during these 10 days of the zoot suit riots is military men would drag these Mexican American teenagers from public places. Some were as young as 12 years old. They would drag them out of the movie theater or the diner. They would throw them on the sidewalk, tear off their clothes, and they would beat them. So the zoot suit, and then a few, this is an actual photograph, and people would gather around to watch it happen, and these white onlookers would do nothing about it. Okay, we're coming into our last topic for the lesson, and that is the experience of Japanese Americans. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Japanese American businesses and homes were attacked. Banks would not cash their checks, so they didn't have access to their money, and grocery stores refused to sell them food. Newspapers, which is how information spread, they printed rumors about Japanese spies. Many Americans believed that if somebody had Japanese heritage, even if they were born in the United States, they were automatically loyal to the country of Japan. I want to, hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. The president, again, the same guy, FDR, he issued an executive order declaring all people of Japanese ancestry to be interned. This meant that they were forced to leave their homes, businesses, jobs, schools, and neighborhoods. They could only take a suitcase and had to leave everything behind. Most, when the war was over, they did not get their homes, businesses, or belongings back. They were all sent to live in internment camps off of the coastline. So I want to give you a little bit of information here in that the Japanese word for being born not in the United States, but being foreign born, say in Japan, at the time of the war, a third were Issei, or born outside of the United States. And this law, this executive order, it prohibited them from becoming citizens if they weren't already. Now, 2/3, so the majority of Japanese American people were Nisei. They were born in the United States, and most were under the age of 21. So they're kids just like you. And everybody of Japanese ancestry was sent to live in these internment camps. Now, they didn't really call them internment camps then. They were called relocation centers. They were designed to be self-sustained. So there at the beginning, especially the Japanese American families, they did have to build their dwellings themselves. They had to grow their own food. That's what the self-sustained part means. They could range from 7,000 to 14,000 at any time. Okay, so this is that executive order, and you can see, so this is the original. This is a primary source. You can see that it is actually taped up on the side of a building. And if you want to pause it here, you can actually read the fine print. This was a Japanese American owned grocery store. And because of the way that they were treated before they were sent to the internment camps, they wanted everybody to know in their community that they were American, that they were not loyal to the Japanese, which is one of the countries that the United States was fighting. This is a photograph. This is a map that shows you where these camps were located, and you can see that they are off the coast. So anybody of Japanese ancestry, they had to move to these relocation centers. So Tule Lake is a famous one. Manzanar is another famous one. Anyways, they are indicated by the triangle. A few photographs of Japanese American families. They were penned in, growing their own food, and this is what they lived in. This is one of the camps. This is a quote by a Japanese American man. "No one should ever be locked away simply because they share the same race, ethnicity, or religion as a spy or terrorist. If that principle was not learned from the internment of Japanese Americans, then these are very dangerous times for our democracy." All right, everybody, these are the sources that I used for this lesson. Please let me know if you have any questions.